Centaurs. For some, it's an icy planetesimal that displays characteristics of both comets and asteroids, but to me, they are a race of beings that are part human and part horse. But while many are most familiar with stories from ancient Greece, Centaurs as a mythological creature is actually older. They go back to Babylonia and the Kassite dynasty some 3,100 to 36,000 years ago. The question remains though, if they were to wear pants, what would be the right way to put them on? I'm Dr. Daryn Reyman-Lock, and welcome to Curious People Wanted. The earliest depictions of centaurs date back to the Kassite dynasty of Ancient Babylonia. Between the 16th and 12th century BC, stone monuments called kuduru were used to delineate boundaries and record royal land grants in a writing called cuneiform. Kuduru, which in Akkadian literally translates to frontier or boundary, often have figural reliefs along the top, some of which are creatures that are half man and half horse. The ancient Babylonians were not the only culture at that time to have centaur-like images. Hittite art also shows similar figures, but how did the idea of centaurs actually come to be? Centaurs as a conceptual being may have started as a form of Calicanceroi, a sort of mischievous human-animal hybrid creature. These creatures could take many forms and could encompass everything from werewolves to vampires. Regardless, they were present in the folklore of various countries such as Greece and Cyprus, Macedonia, Serbia, Bulgaria, Turkey, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and even Albania. In Greece, however, they are more goblin-like and have the lower body of a goat. By contrast, a creature called Kalos Kentauros, or centaurs, are specifically equine in disposition. Representations in Greek art demonstrate that there were different ideas of what centaurs actually were. Early Greek art depicts men wearing the hindquarters of horses attached to their waists. Over time, this changed. Figural scenes painted on ceramic vessels show centaurs as having human torsos that terminated in the body of a horse. But their appearance ranges from the upper body of a human attached to the body of a horse with 4 equine legs, to versions of a complete human body with either feet or hooves, with an entire equine body and hind legs behind. Centaurs are the only version of Calicanceroi that seem to be honored though. Centaurs were not just a decorative image used for drinking cups. They also featured in many Greek writings and epic poetry. In the 8th century BC, Homer wrote the Iliad, an epic poem that is set in the final weeks of the siege of Troy. In this poem, centaurs are portrayed as drunk and violent, with descriptions that called them the strongest, shaggiest centaurs, wild brutes of the mountains. Other writings go further and suggest that centaurs were lawless, wild beings that were slaves to their animal passions. The exception to this rule appears to be the centaur Chiron, who Homer describes as the most wise and most just of all the centaurs. We will talk about Chiron more in a minute, but Homer doesn't really give any physical description of centaurs. He chose instead to refer to them only as beasts. It wasn't until the poet Pindar, writing in the 5th century BC, that centaurs are actually described as half human, half equine. It is also Pindar who goes so far as to assign and popularize a myth of origin for the entire species. So the story goes, the centaurs were born of seduction. The Thessalian king Ixion was attracted to Hera, Zeus's wife. Zeus, who wanted to test Ixion's lust, created a cloud nymph in the shape of Hera named Nephele. Ixion raped Nephele, who, as a result, conceived a son named Centaurs, who later mated with the Magnesian mares of Mount Pelion and sired the race of centaurs. Like Homer 3 centuries before, Pindar also sets Chiron apart from the rest of his kind, assigning him not only different parentage, but also setting him among the stars. According to Pindar's Pythian odes, Chiron was the son of the Titan Cronus and the Oceanid Philyra, and was taught by Apollo and Artemis. These two gods are known for many things. Apollo is the god of prophecy and oracles, music, song, poetry, archery, and healing, while Artemis is the goddess of the hunt, wild animals, nature and vegetation, chastity, childbirth, and children. Because of this, it is no wonder that throughout Greek mythology, Chiron is constantly revered and praised for his wisdom, his knowledge of medicine, and was even sought to instruct demigods like Hercules, Achilles, and Asclepius. There are many versions of his story, but most state he was honored with a place in the sky and is now the constellation we call Centaurus. While Chiron's story seems to be exceptional, there are two other centaurs who are also seen as separate from the rest of the race. These are Pholus and Nessus. While there are several stories concerning their deaths, many say that Chiron, Pholus, and Nessus were killed in some way by an arrow coated in poison from the seven-headed sea monster Hydra. Despite the glory assigned to Chiron, Greek literature seems to time and time again refer to something called the Centaur-Like, a period which was punctuated by a series of fights or wars between humans and centaurs. During the later Greek period, centaurs are also shown to pull the chariot of Dionysus, the god of wine, ecstasy, and fruitfulness, or being bound and ridden by the god Eros, the god of love, desire, and passion. These images and ideas are repeated during the Roman period in both literature and art. Scholars believe that these stories and images are allusions to the inherent nature of the centaur race, their drunk, amorous habits, and their symbolism. They are seen as representations of man's dualistic nature. Man is both an intellectual creature, but also still partly animal. It's an allegory to the push and pull between civility and barbarity, which is seen as a threat to the social order. But the history of centaurs does not end with Greece. Like mermaids, centaurs continued to be represented throughout the medieval era in books called Bestiaries. Bestiaries themselves are believed to have roots in a book called the Physiologus, a word that translates as naturalist. Written in Alexandria, Egypt during the 2nd century AD, this book summarized what was known about animals from writings by Herodotus, Pliny the Elder, and Aristotle, as well as other early naturalists. Discussion of the Physiologus could be a video unto itself, but suffice it to say that this book was the forerunner of the medieval bestiaries, which were elaborately illustrated and combined legend, folklore, moral guidance, observation of the natural world, and wrapped it all in Christian theology. In medieval bestiaries, centaurs in their hybrid human-horse glory are representative of the Christian sin of hypocrisy. Their appearance from the front conceals their beastly nature behind. But that being said, they are often a demonic image. It should also be noted that centaurs often hold medicinal plants in these books too, which is interesting because it may be a nod to Chiron's medical skills and his role as the teacher of Asclepius, the Greek god of medicine and healing. It also establishes a link between medicine and centaurs that is reflective of the stories of Chiron, Pholus, and Nessus, all of whom were killed from poison in many versions of their history. Over a century after many bestiaries are written, centaurs appear again in literature. In the 14th century, Chiron, Nessus, and Pholus make an appearance in Dante's Inferno. The three of them are in the first ring of the seventh circle of hell, the hell of the violent and bestial. They are in charge of guarding the violent, the murderers, the tyrants, kings, and warlords who stand in a river of boiling blood called Phlegethon. They are charged with shooting any souls trying to escape. I'll let that ring a bit and move on to a somewhat more chipper topic. Our centaur Phil. Okay, so what about Phil? What's his story? Well, Phil was born Philoctetes in Thessaloniki, Greece, around the year 1300 BC. An impressionable youth, he was involved in the fight against the Lapiths and was exiled from Mount Pelion when the Centaurs lost that battle. He was almost 1,000 years old when Alexander the Great came to power and was good friends with Alexander's horse, Bucephalus, which incidentally means cowhead. I won't go through all of Phil's early history since he's part Numenorian. That means there's a lot of it. He found himself in London during the mid-14th century, and it was around this time that he decided to adopt a more English-sounding name, which was more befitting his station as Lord Carnarvon. He changed his name to Filliam Fitzroy and remained in favor with generations of English kings. He fled the country under King Henry VIII's rule and ended up in Russia, where he became one of the most trusted advisors to Catherine the Great. Eventually making his way to America, Phil lived among the wild horses of Assateague Island before traveling westward to Arizona, where he settled with his wife, 2 children, and Labrador Trixie before coming to stay at the museum. Phil enjoys having fun, but can be a bit lawless. When we reopen, he has specifically requested that his label state that he is the Centaur of Attention, but we are not allowed to ever give his exact birthday. If you are wondering how he looks so young despite being almost 4,000 years old, he has a very vigorous facial regime, which is a mix of exfoliation and hydration. Email me and I'd be happy to give you the details. Please like and share this video, subscribe to our channel, and feel free to comment if there's a topic you'd like me to explore more. But most importantly, remember to stay curious.